Accommodation of social distancing requirements prompted many historic changes to how lawmakers handle the state's business, from remote hearings to sparsely populated chambers. Lobbyists were another group impacted by the changes.
Input from stakeholders is a phrase that we often hear at the Capitol, people who follow the legislature. How did COVID-19 impact lobbying?
Well, it impacted it pretty dramatically. And when you think of stakeholders, MGRC represents people who, or let me back up. MGRC is a Minnesota Government Relations Council, and we're a trade association of dues-paying members who, for the most part, are either primarily engaged in lobbying or have some component of their job, their profession that's lobbying, and folks who are registered with the campaign finance. When you think of stakeholders, there's more people than that. There's citizen lobbyists. There are people who show up for days at the Capitol. The folks you might see visiting legislators in their offices as part of Bemidji Day comes to mind because they all wear the
yes, when everybody
shirts.
Wears plaid. Yes.
Right. And so a lot of those things were lost, and they're critical elements in helping educate legislators about whatever a particular issue is. Beyond that, you lose the component of the lobbyist job where we help maybe coordinate the process. You know, there are things that need to take place that legislators and their staff sometimes don't have time for, and they rely on us.
Well, so Majority Leader Gazelka said that the final days of the session felt weird. That was his quote. Due to the lack of in-person meetings, the hallway conversations, you know, there's a lot of ebb and flow and in the moment kinds of things like, don't forget this, or what about this that happened at the end. So what have you heard from other people who hang around the Capitol? How did it affect their ability to get in touch with lawmakers at the end?
Well, I've heard a lot of frustration, and it started even before that. There were hearings where prior to hearings, the lobbyists and the legislators weren't necessarily able to have real-time communication about amendments or surprises that were coming up. And that put everyone, I think, at a disadvantage because current information about things that are happening on the fly can lead to, pretty negative outcomes. And same thing was true at the end of session, where the horse trading, so to speak, was taking place at the end. People like me didn't necessarily have the ability in real time to communicate with our clients and get back on what a compromise might look like, what was acceptable, what wasn't. And I think a lot of that impacted not just outcomes for us, but outcomes for legislators. Not a lot of bills got passed, and that certainly wasn't just to do with the fact that lobbyists weren't able to participate. I don't want to overstate our role here, but they do rely on us for a lot of information.
Well, and to that point, in terms of committee meetings, normally a lobbyist can just show up, and get their 2 or 3 minutes at the end of a meeting on whatever topic, but you really had to be on your game. You had to be watching the agendas, and you had to make sure that you let the committee administrator know that you wanted to speak and to get on the Zoom call. It was maybe a more difficult process?
Without a doubt, more difficult. Though I have to give so much credit to the staff and to the legislators who were able to pick up and run with what was a very clunky process and make it work at all. And I'll grant you that the ability to just, whereas in a smaller Zoom meeting you can just raise your hand and interject yourself, that wasn't a possibility. And for those of us who had more sophisticated understanding of the process, we were able to get involved. But for people that do government relations as a small portion of their job, or perhaps citizens, it was really difficult.
Now, is there a silver lining here at all? I mean, we've all gotten a lot better at technology and communicating in ways that we wouldn't normally communicate. Granted, our preference is always in person, or for many of us, for me, in person. But is there a silver lining here anywhere?
Beyond how nice my yard looks, in this line of work, you simply don't get springtime to do any kind of work. No, the silver lining, I think, is that there are times where, for whatever reason, expense, personal difficulty, or whatever the case may be, an expert might not be able to get in front of a committee. And I'm hoping that in the future, this technology will help to bring more relevant experts to the legislature. I happen to believe that the more educated a legislator can be, the better outcomes we might experience. So I'm hopeful that the comfort and the familiarity we developed during the crisis with technology will help the process in the future.
Jeremy Estenson, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.